The United States Supreme Court has just handed down a massive 6-3 ruling that completely alters the ground rules for federal immigration enforcement and green card holders. In the case Blanche versus Lau, the Supreme Court just cleared the way for Border Patrol officers to more freely deny standard entry to green card holders returning from a trip abroad if they have committed a crime. Writing for the majority, Justice Clarence Thomas held that the federal laws do not require border agents to meet a high evidentiary standard before denying immediate re-entry into the United States. The denial can occur simply if a crime has been committed instead of a full conviction. This ruling has triggered a fierce ideological clash on the bench, with the liberal wing launching a blistering dissent, accusing the conservative majority of handing the government a massive blank check to upend the lives of legal residents. So today we're going to break down what exactly happened in this ruling, the two fundamental distinct legal philosophies that are on the Supreme Court and have actually divided the court, and what this means going forward. Now, before we jump into what the Supreme Court did in this ruling, if you like this type of content and you want to make sure that you get it going forward, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and also turn on all notifications to ensure you never miss this type of information when I release it. Now, to understand how this reached the Supreme Court, we have to look at the facts of this case and how essentially this challenge eventually got its way to the Supreme Court. Now, the individual here, Mr. Lau, is a Chinese citizen who became a lawful permanent resident back in 2007. Now, in May of 2012, Mr. Lau was charged in the state of New Jersey with trademark counterfeiting for allegedly storing nearly $300,000 worth of counterfeit clothing. Now, while he was awaiting his trial, Mr. Lau took a temporary trip to China, and when he flew back into JFK on June 15th of 2012, he assumed that he would be processed normally. Now, under federal immigration law, green card holders possess a default right to be treated as already admitted into the country. They don't have to reapply for admission every single time that they return from this type of short trip. But there are specific statutory exceptions to that rule. A Border Patrol officer can strip that default status away if a resident has committed a certain offense, including a crime involving what the statute states is moral turpitude. Now, relying solely on the active New Jersey indictment revolving around the counterfeit clothing, the Border Patrol officer declined to formally admit Mr. Lau into the country. Instead, the officer confiscated his permanent green card, gave him a temporary paperwork status, and essentially paroled him into the country to face that prosecution. Now, about a year later, Mr. Lau pled guilty to those counterfeiting charges. The government then used that conviction to launch formal removal proceedings against Mr. Lau. And because of this, Mr. Lau then filed a lawsuit arguing that the Border Patrol officer actually jumped the gun. He claimed that at the moment that he was standing at the border gate, an indictment that was against him was not proof that he had actually committed a crime. Now, on first review, an immigration appeals court disagreed with Mr. Lau. They disagreed with his position and ruled against him. That then led for him to file an appeal up to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, on review, the Second Circuit agreed with Mr. Lau and reversed the lower court ruling against him. The Second Circuit ruled that Border Patrol officers must possess clear and convincing evidence of a crime before stripping a resident's status on the spot. Now, after the Second Circuit ruling, the United States government then sought Supreme Court review and took this to the Supreme Court and sought cert. The Supreme Court granted review of this case, and in a 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court completely vacated the Second Circuit's ruling. Now, writing for the majority, Justice Thomas established a clear two-step framework for how the Immigration and Nationality Act actually operates. At step 1, which happens right at the border, the statute only requires the commission of the crime to justify regarding the resident as an applicant for admission. Step 2, the actual conviction or formal admission of guilt, is what is required later during the formal removing hearing and proceedings to prove that they are inadmissible. The core of the majority's ruling is that courts have no business reading extra words into federal statutes that Congress chose to actually leave out. Thomas explicitly points out that the statute uses the word committed, not convicted. As the majority put it in the opinion, a person does not commit a conviction. Therefore, if a Border Patrol officer has a valid reason to believe a disqualifying offense actually occurred, such as an active criminal indictment, the law allows them to make a quick judgment call on the spot. Furthermore, the majority rejected the idea that the government must prove its case by clear and convincing evidence at the border. Justice Thomas noted that while the government does bear a high burden of proof at the final removal hearing, nothing in the text of the law imposes that heavy burden on the front line, on these Border Patrol officers when they're actually making these real-time split decisions, that happen while they're trying to maintain security and make these rapid decisions. Because Mr. Lau eventually pled guilty, the government fully satisfied its burden of proof at the actual hearing with clear and convincing evidence. Now, predictably, this interpretation of the majority faced sharp criticism by the court's liberal wing. You had Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson that was joined by Sotomayor and Kagan, and in that lengthy decision, they focused heavily on due process and the presumption of innocence. The dissent argues that by allowing the government to act first and justify its behavior years later at a hearing, the court is completely undermining the statutory security that a green card holder is supposed to be guaranteed in their view. Justice Jackson highlighted what she believes was the real-world consequences of this ruling, noting that Mr. Lau was paroled, his permanent green card was confiscated, and this kind of left him in an unstable immigration limbo for decades. She argues that temporary paperwork makes it incredibly hard and difficult for a legal resident to secure housing, open bank accounts, or potentially maintain employment. From the dissent's perspective, the bedrock American maxim that everyone is innocent until proven guilty should prevent a Border Patrol officer from stripping a permanent resident of their status based on a mere accusation or indictment before a court of law has actually ever found them guilty. Now, ultimately, this case and decision exposes a profound divide on the Supreme Court regarding the separation of powers and statutory boundaries. For the majority, this case is a very straightforward matter of enforcing the literal text that was passed by Congress, which gives Border Patrol officers the flexibility to make necessary spot judgments without judicial interference. For the dissenters, in their view, this ruling represents a troubling expansion of executive authority at the expense of individual rights, and they argue it goes against due process. So what are your thoughts on this opinion that was authored by Justice Thomas by this, a majority of the court, that 6-3 ruling? Do you agree with the Thomas, strict textualist reading of the immigration statute? Or do you think the court got this wrong? Do you agree with the dissenters that this goes against due process and the, American maxim that you are innocent until proven guilty? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Again, drop those down below. If you like this type of content and you want to make sure that you get it going forward, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and also turn on all notifications to ensure you never miss these videos when I release them. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.